Okay, tone it down so we can get going now. Ancient Greek has other words for love besides the three that we have looked at and the two yet to come, but they're of very, very little importance, so we're not going to look at those. Of course, we've saved ourselves for the end the two most important words in the love group of words in Greek. You may not want to start copying because there'll be a lot of things underneath each thing, or you'll have to copy and then redo the whole thing again. We're going to be talking about our phileo terms. So we're on number 4, and then we'll say a lot of things in between each of these. We've got phileo, then we've got two other words that are related as A and B. Then we have these multiple compounds, 21 compounds, all found in the New Testament of the phileo term. Phileo. I don't have room to spell everything up here, so I'll try to spell them as I go along. I'll point up there. We're on this first one. Phileo. Phileo. This is the most important of the Old Greek terms for love. No term is more important than phileo for the Old Greek words for love. By the time of the Septuagint and the New Testament, however, the agapao words, which will be our final and fifth category to look at, have taken over the first rank. So I said this is the most important for our Old Greek terms for love. For our New Testament terms, the agapao terms are of the utmost importance. This word and its cognates are found over 100 times in the New Testament. This is the father word, phileo. All of these are derivatives of the chief term phileo. Phileo. You know of your term eros now, that's one of the terms. Phileo is the second of the three important ones, and agapao will be the third one. Okay, phileo. Now, I've just done a whole lot of study on this. That's what I'm going to share with you. It's found 33 times, and I've run all of these references. It's found 33 times in the Septuagint. Just phileo. It's found 25 times in the New Testament, with more than half of them, 15, just in John's writings. So it's a favorite word of the Apostle John. More than half of its occurrences are in John's writings, 25. Mostly, these words are used for the love that men have. Only a small handful refer to divine love. There are approximately 6 references of the 25 in the New Testament where it is not man love, but it's God's love. 4 of these are of Jesus Christ, and 2 of these speak of God. I know we're going to be overwhelming you with statistics, but that way you'll have it in a very neat and concise form. And if I could tell you to open such and such book and turn to such and such page and you would find this on here, I would tell you that, but it can't be found. You have to do all of that yourself. So that's what I'm trying to help you with. 6 times it has reference to divine love. So, and you're just going to learn various characteristics of these words, like your eros words, or words that speak of possessiveness and of worthiness. They are characterized by love of the worthy and a desire to possess. It ends up base meanings of sensuality. It doesn't start that way. It's romantic love to begin with. Phileo is a man term for love. Only rarely is it used for God's love. Now, it is used of God's love, but since we're looking at statistics, we're doing statistical studies for the Greek terms, and we have to look where the weight is. And the weight for God's love is not with eros. It's never used of God. It's rarely ever used with phileo. Most of the times are agapao when they are of divine origin. I said 4 of the 6 have reference to Jesus' love. And I'm going to give you references for all of these things. That would be John chapter 11, verse 3. You might not have time to read all of them. I think I can go through here, because it's just interesting to know. And we wish we could have almost a Bible, because different meanings are attached to these terms. A Bible that would give us either agapao or phileo. I'm not necessarily suggesting you write it in, but you will never know otherwise unless you have all this memorized, and it's pretty much impossible to do. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, sisters of Lazarus, Mary and Martha, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest, and it's not an agapao term, it's a phileo term. He whom thou lovest is sick. There's once of Jesus. Jesus, in other words, in his earthly life could manifest phileo type love, and he manifested it toward a human being. Same chapter and verse 36. Then said the Jews. Now neither one of these times did the term love come from Jesus' lips. Once it comes from Mary and Martha, and once it comes from the Jews in general in verse 36. Then said the Jews, so they were familiar with the term in Palestine, the Jewish people were, behold how he loved him. Then in chapter 13 and verse 23, now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. These are 3 of the 4 references of the love of Jesus, and it's phileo, not agapao. Now this term, John 13:23, this term comes from John's own mind then. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. And then in Revelation chapter 3 and verse 19, as many as I love. Here's the only time where this term is on Jesus' lips, speaking of his own love. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. So we have John 11:3, John 11:36, John 13:23, Revelation 3:19. And then 2 of them speak of the love of God, which would probably incline us to believe that it's the love of God the Father. First of all, we have John chapter 16 and verse 27. You're going to find it in Jesus' discourse here. For the Father himself loveth you, because ye have loved me and have believed that I came out from God. Now, the only one we're looking at is the first loveth, because we're talking about references that are of divine love. So the Father can express phileo love. For the Father himself loveth you. And then in the same book, John chapter 5 and verse 20, for the Father loveth the Son. Now that one needs to be marked in your notes. All of the others are references of God's love for mankind, and they're using this phileo term, which some people say now is a weaker term than the agapao words. And we'll get into whether or not it's weaker. We'll get into the meanings as we go along. You just need to know these things or have them written down somewhere, who the object of the love is and who the giver of the love is. And here there is phileo love between the Father and the Son, that the Father expresses toward the Son. So, I mean, by deduction, the Son loves the Father with phileo, and the Spirit. All 3 love one another with phileo love. And showeth him all things that himself doeth it, and he will show him greater works than these, that ye might marvel. It can also have a bad sense. Phileo can have a bad sense. Matthew 6:5. The reason we're giving you so many statistics on this is to just shoot down popular misconceptions about the terms. Matthew 6:5. When thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues, in the corners of the streets. And it's a phileo term for love. So you'll always get love in the Bible, in the KJV, and probably most other versions. You'll always get something like love. You won't get a Greek. You certainly won't get transliteration, and so you don't know how the various words are used and how they can be used, they're allowed to, and how they cannot be. The depth of phileo love must be defined by the subject, by the object, and by the circumstances. I think I've said that more or less is in general true about love. That love can, although the essence of love is still the essence of love, it can be manifested in different ways, different degrees, because of people and circumstances, situations. So the depth of phileo love is defined by three things: the subject, the object, and the circumstances. Now our first important derivative from this is philos. Philos. P-H-I-L-O-S. Philos. P-H-I-L-O-S. It occurs 188 times in the Septuagint, with 123 of those just in the Apocrypha. So it's a chief word, a chief love term in the Apocrypha. Now that's a large, disproportionate amount that is found in the Apocrypha rather than the other canonical books in the Septuagint. It's found 29 times in the New Testament. Phileo, the chief term, is found 25 in the New Testament. Phileo is found 25 with 15 in John. Philos, P-H-I-L-O-S, is found 29 times in the New Testament, with 18 of these, again, way more than half, in Luke. So it's a favorite term of Luke's. What does the word mean? Philos, the word means friend. That's generally how it will be translated. Friend. Okay, although sometimes it speaks of Jesus being a friend. Matthew 11:19. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, Behold, a man gluttonous and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. Philos. Matthew 11:19. Sometimes it can speak of Jesus being a friend of men. John 11:11. These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our Philos Lazarus sleepeth, our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go, that I may awake him out of sleep. So this phileo concept, philos concept, is found much in the narrative of the death and the raising from the dead of Lazarus. Chapter 15 and verse 14. Ye are my friends, if ye do whatsoever I command you. Ye are my friends. Well, that means Jesus is their friend then, as well. Once it can have reference to God the Father, philos, as being friend. And that's in James chapter 2 and verse 23. The scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and Abraham was called the friend of God. Well, that means that God's his friend, so by implication that's seen as well. So there are 4 out of the 29 times. Those are the only 4 divine references. References to Jesus or the Father or the Holy Spirit. Most of the references are men-to-men type friends and friendship. Such as in Acts chapter 10 and verse 24. The morrow after they entered into Caesarea, Peter and his couple of men that he took with him, Cornelius waited for them and had called together his kinsmen, relatives, and his near friends, philos, and his near friends. So that's man-to-man friend. and chapter 19 and verse 31. Certain of the Asiarchs, the chief of Asia, which were Paul's friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself into the theater. And then our next chief term, which we've got up here as 4b, is philia, Philia, philia. It's found 38 times in the Septuagint. It's found once in the New Testament, James chapter 4, verse 4, and it's another term for friend. Ye adulteresses, know ye not that friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be the friend of the world is the enemy of God. So we're divided up somewhat, but we're still talking about the phileo terms. Now, of chief importance in the New Testament are what we call the phileo compounds, of which there are 21 in number, and you are seeing some of them up in front of you now. We'll put the rest of them up in a moment. Now, there's only one possible compound word from the agapao group, and even that term's not found in the New Testament. But there are 21 compounds just in the New Testament of phileo. They're very interesting and probably worth briefly listing and reading and defining. So keep that in mind. Phileo is a word that is easily and frequently compounded with another term. Agapao is only rarely compounded. There's only one other term that's compounded with agapao, and it's not found in the New Testament, so it's one that we won't study. But the phileo term just suits itself to making very, very many compounds. So we'll start under 4C, the compounds, and we will begin with number 1. Philoxenia. To spell these for you, and we'll give you the references. And by the way, now, these will not be found a lot of times, like for phileo is 25 or philos 29. Well, it'll not be found a lot of times. They'll be found 1 or 2 or 3 or at the most 4 or 5 or 6 times. Generally just a time or two is all they'll be seen. Philoxenia. Hebrews chapter 13. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 2. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Okay, that with Romans 12:13. Romans 12:13. Distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. So we've got, be not forgetful to entertain. Well, that speaks of hospitality, you know. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. And then over in Romans 12:13, distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. And then you take this word with the next term, Philoxenos, philoxenos. Philoxenos, philoxenos, which is found in 1 Timothy 3:2. 1 Timothy 3:2. Bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, sober, sound-minded, of good behavior, given to hospitality. Given to hospitality. Titus chapter 1 and verse 8, where it's going to be found in the same context. The bishop must be a lover of hospitality. And 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 9. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. So we've got hospitality, entertain, various terms like that. These two words come from two words that mean stranger and friend. We've talked about this before in looking at hospitality as a Christian virtue. Philoxenia and philoxenos mean to treat the stranger like you would a friend. Now, for our purposes, the 1 Peter 4:9 and Romans 12:13 are the two good ethical passages, and Hebrews 13:2 would follow on that. 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:8 really wouldn't apply so much because they are for the ministry and not for people in general. So remember what we're studying, Christian ethics. 1 Peter 4:9, use hospitality one to another without grudging. The word originally meant to treat a stranger as you would a friend. Now, if you know one another in the church, you're not a stranger, but treat a friend like a friend then. So it's a friendly term. It's brother to brother, and it comes from the love group. Okay, number 3, philoprouo, philoprouo. Philoprouo. It's found one time. It's just amazing how many compounds of phileo are found in the New Testament. Found one time, 3 John, and they're everywhere. You have to run everywhere to find all the references. 3 John and verse 9. 3 John and verse 9. I wrote into the church, but Diotrephes, who loveth to have the preeminence among them, receiveth us not. Philoprouo. It's a long term, and it's translated with a long phrase here. It means to love to be first. To love to be first. So it's a love term. To love to be first. And it's translated in the KJV as loveth to have the preeminence. That's a good way to translate it, because it means a lover of being first in line or first in recognition. The reason by the way, I've never explained why everything's out of socket here, just so you can see the terms over here. That's the only reason I've got them disjointed here. Here's 1, 2, we just look at 3 here, and I moved 2 way over here just so I don't have them so much on top of one another. If you're back there, you can't distinguish the top word from the bottom or the beginning of it from the end. Number 4, philanthropia. Philanthropia. Philantropia. Acts 28:2. The barbarous people showed us no little kindness. So we discussed kindness as a Christian virtue before, but we didn't look at this verse because it's a different term than the kindness term. They kindled a fire and received us everyone because of the present rain and because of the cold. And then in Titus chapter 3 and verse 4. Titus 3:4. But after that, the kindness and love of God, our Savior, toward man appeared. Now there we have kindness, the kindness term. We don't have a pity term, so we've probably got that crossed out in our margin. We've got pity in the margin for love of God, but it's not a pity term. It's love of God, our Savior, toward man. What does this word mean? It means one who loves mankind. And so you have a long phrase there. The love of God, our Savior, toward man. A lover of mankind. Philanthropia. Then number 5, philanthropos. 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 Is just the adverb of philanthropia, of number 4. It's found once in Acts chapter 27 and verse 3. And here you've got Julius courteously entreated Paul and gave him liberty to go to his friends and to refresh himself. These are ones obviously we're not trying to change too many translations on, because it borders on the insane to go through too many of these and try to change, because they're not important words, because they're only found infrequently in the New Testament. Okay, number 6, philopronos. Philophronos. Philophronos. It's another compound adverb. It's found in Acts 28:7. We've looked at a couple of these before, you see. These are the courteously words, courteously treated. And it means something like of a loving mind, of a loving mind. Okay, that brings us down to number 7, Philadelphia, which we pronounce Philadelphia, but Philadelphia, different accent. Philadelphia, Philadelphia, Philadelphia. Philadelphia is called the city of what? Brotherly love. That's exactly what the word means, brotherly love. It's used in secular writings. This is one of the important compound phileo terms, Philadelphia. It's used in secular writings to speak of the natural love between biological siblings. It's never used in the spiritual sense outside of Christian writings. If it's ever used outside of Christian, that means the New Testament and church writings. It always means the natural love between biological siblings. Appears 5 times, so it's one of the compounds found most often, which is not that often, but more than just one. It's found 5 times, Philadelphia. So you have to chalk it up as being one of the most important compound words of phileo. Philadelphia is found 5 times. Romans chapter 12 and verse 10, first time in English order that it's found. Be kindly affectioned one to another. We looked at that phrase last time, or not last time, I think that might have been the time before. We looked at that phrase. It comes from the Storge terms of familial love there. Well, the next one also comes from a word that means familial love, but here it's specified as being love between siblings, not parents for children or children for parents, but between siblings, between brothers and sisters. Now this verse is interesting, Romans 12:10, because we've got 2 different love terms. We've got the storge idea here, and we've got the brotherly love idea. Be kindly affectioned one to another, and your margin says in the love of the brethren. Well, that's the same as saying really with brotherly love. Here it's used not in just the biological, not at all in the biological sibling sense, but in the family of God Christian sense. 1 Thessalonians 4:19. It's only found this way in Christian writings. Philadelphia is only found in this context, in a spiritual brother-to-brother love context. Let's see, 1 Thessalonians 4:19. I'm really needing an extra verse there to get that out of. You do too, huh? Well, praise God. Next book doesn't have 4 chapters. It couldn't be in it. And none of these chapters have 19 verses. Let's see. 9 is what I need. As touching brotherly love, Philadelphia, ye need not that I write unto you. And it's just the first one there, brotherly love, not the second one. You're taught of God to love one another, just the first one. Then Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 1. So now we saw the Hebrews 13:2 one is the treat the stranger like the friend passage, and this will start off saying, let brotherly love continue. Hebrews 13:1, let brotherly love. So far in the KJV, it's always been uniform as brotherly love, and that's exactly what it means. 1 Peter 1:22.
For the continuation of this message.
1 Peter 1:22. Seeing ye have purified your souls in obeying the truth unto unfeigned love of the brethren. Or now they're not consistent, but it means the same. You could say unto unfeigned brotherly love. See that ye love one another. Now that's a different term there. Just the first one. Love of the brethren, brotherly love. With your heart fervently. And in 2 Peter 1:7. Now 2 Peter 1:7 will have another term for love as well. So many of these verses. See, I have had to run every single one of these references and then collate the material and then find out how it's used and how it can't be used and what the distinctions are. And look at this verse. This is an interesting one in 2 Peter 1:7. Add to your faith these various virtues. Add to godliness, and King James says brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. But it should say, and to godliness brotherly love, and to brotherly love, love. Add to, and we'll have to come back to this later, add to, as a virtue, add to brotherly love, love. Okay, there must be a difference then. We can see that right away. There must be a difference between add to, or he wouldn't be saying add to. What you have in the first place as this virtue he mentions, brotherly, not brotherly kindness. It's not a kindness term, it's a love term. It's Philadelphia. To godliness, brotherly love. And then it's repeated here, and to brotherly love, charity, which is love, which is another love term. Okay, that brings us to number 8 then. Philadelphos. 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 Well, you can see it's very similar to Philadelphia. It's the adjective form of Philadelphia. And it's found one time in 1 Peter 3:8. And I think this ought to get us through with this verse then, in the KJV, 1 Peter 3:8. Finally, be all of one mind, be sympathetic, love as brethren, margin, loving the brethren. Well, I guess the love as brethren would be the best, because we just need the idea of brotherly love again. It's just the adjective form of the brotherly love term. So be all of one mind, be sympathetic, have brotherly love, be tender-hearted, and be humble. That's one where you need scissors and paste to doctor that verse up in the KJV. because they give us compassion, pity, and courteous terms, and we need the sympathy, tender-heartedness, and humility terms. They gave us three that we didn't need. They gave us the love term, okay, and we need the term brethren in there, so we have brotherly love from that. And we're not going to get to the place where we're going to do a lot of commenting on this. We're just going to try to get through with all of these statistics here, which will prepare us then to do some work on commenting on this in the New Testament. Then number 9, all the women in the church will be interested in number 9, philandros. Philandros, Philandros. It's found one time, Titus chapter 2, verse 4. Going to get back and look at this passage. We don't need to doctor on it here. We've already doctored enough that the aged men be sober, dignified, sound-minded, sound in faith. The aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may train the young women to philandros, love their husbands. It means to love your husband. Philandros. It's a compound word for man and for love. Love your man, love your husband. Titus 2:4. And then number 10, philoteknos. 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 It's found in the same passage. Titus 2:4. What do you think it means? Love your children. Beautiful compound. This is a beautiful word. One of my favorite words because it is so diversified. It can mean to love mankind, to love your brother, to treat the stranger like a friend, to love your husband, to love your children. It can mean some bad things, and we're coming to those now. Number 11. Philautos. Philautos. What does it look like? You see, you can see a lot in these terms here. What does it look like that word is saying? You love auto, you love self. 2 Timothy 3:2. It means to be a lover of yourself. So we went from two good references, a lover of husbands and children, to the wife loving herself. Well, it can mean anyone, of course, loving themselves. 2 Timothy 3:2. Here it's men, so women are okay. For men shall be lovers of their own selves. Philautos, lovers of their own selves. Okay, number 12. Philarguros. P-H-I, someone's getting ahead, L-A-R-G-U-R-O-S. P-H-I-L-A-R-G-U-R-O-S. It's found in 2 Timothy 3:2 as well. Men shall be lovers of their own selves. We know what that term is. Covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy. It's got to be one of those. I'll give you another reference, and you keep your finger here and then see if you can come back and get the one that it is here. It's found one other place, Luke 16 and verse 14. Luke 16:14. What's the common denominator? So what does it mean? A lover of money. It means to love money. It's It's found in 2 Timothy 3:2 as covetous, and in Luke 16:14 as covetous. Now, epithumia means to covet, also remember. And it's a chief term for covet in the New Testament. But here's a phileo term that can be a covet term. But I guess what you really need to know about that is, you could covet many different things. Generally, we think of money when we think of covet or covetousness, but you could covet anything. So these references are not just covet in general or covetousness in general. They're specifically speaking of money, a love of money. Philarguros. Number 13, philarguria. Now, it looks to me almost exactly like the one above, and it is. Philarguria. It's found only one time in the New Testament. That's 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10. First Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10, for the love of money. It means the exact same thing, it's just in a little different form. These two words mean the exact same thing, to love money. For the love of money is the root of all evil. Philarguria. Okay, number 14. Philedonos. 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 Back to 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy 3 has several of these words. It has number 11, and it has number 12, and it has number 14, it has number 15. 2 Timothy 3, this little passage, this know also in the last days perilous times will come, and here are the signs, and 4 of these signs here are from phileo terms. So philedonos. 2 Timothy 3:4. Traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures. It means to be a lover of pleasure. And then the next term, philotheos, is the next phrase in 2 Timothy 3:4, more than lovers of God. See how this is these compound terms are so varied here. So we found 4 here. We found a lover of self, a lover of money, and a lover of pleasure. Those were 3 negatives here. Verse 2, we found a lover of self, a lover of money. That's behind the word covetous. And we find in verse 4, lovers of pleasures. There's a 3rd negative use of phileo here. And then our good one, of course, is rather than, all these things rather than a philotheos, a lover of God. 2 Timothy 3:4. Okay, number 16, philoneikia. Philoneikia. And then we're going to look at number 17 along with this, because you can tell they're the same words. Philonekos. Philonneikos. Each is found only one time. They mean exactly the same thing. Let's look and see what they mean. Okay, for number 16, philoneikia, Luke 22:24. There was also a strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. And for the second term, number 17, philonekos, 1 Corinthians 11:16. Each of these are the same, essentially the same term. They mean exactly the same thing. 1 Corinthians 11:16. If any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of God. Okay, what does the word mean then? What do both of these words mean? If you're going to tie these passages together, Luke 22:24, 1 Corinthians 11:16. What's the common denominator between the two? What? Someone's saying it. Strife. Strife. It means a lover of strife or a lover of contention. Or the love of it. I always say a lover because it involves people here, but it means the love of strife or the love of contention. So you could have strife over here in 1 Corinthians 11:16, but contentious is just fine though. Okay, number 18. Philogathos. P-H-I-L-A-G-A-T-H-O-S. It's found one time, Titus chapter 1 and verse 8, a verse that we've used one chief time, and I think one time in addition to that in Christian ethics earlier. Titus chapter 1 and verse 8. We need this second phrase here, a lover of good, not men or things, as in the margin, but simply a lover of good. We've already looked at a lover of hospitality, remember. That was love the stranger as a friend, philoxenos. Okay, number 19, the last one that you'll be able to see, and then I'll have to move it for you again. Number 19, philotimeomai. P-H-I-L-O-T-I-M-E-O-M-A-I. This is an interesting word. Philadelphia is probably our most important one. This is not one of our most important ones. It's just interesting. The word means to love ambition. Philotimeomai means to love ambition. So it means ambitious. And it's used 3 times. You could get a little sermon out of the way that it's used probably. It's used 3 times. I'll give these to you and we'll look at them in this order. Romans 15:20, 2 Corinthians 5:9, and 1 Thessalonians 4:11. Okay, Romans 15:20. Yea, so have I strived to preach the gospel, not where Christ was named, lest I should build upon another man's foundation. There it's been translated strived. Yea, so have I strived to preach the gospel. Then 2 Corinthians 5:9. Wherefore we labor. Here it's translated labor, and in the margin as endeavor, that whether present or absent we may be accepted of him. And then in 1 Thessalonians 4:11, and that ye study to be quiet. And here it's translated study, to do your own business, to work with your own hands as we have commanded you. So here's what you get out of these 3 passages when you put them together then. We should be ambitious. It means to love ambition. We should be ambitious to preach the gospel. Romans 15:20. That was Paul's context. I strive to preach the gospel. He means that he's very ambitious. He loves ambition, and it's the ambition of preaching the gospel. Secondly, we should be ambitious to please God. That's 2 Corinthians 5:9. Paul said we labor to please God, that whether we be with him in the spirit or present here in the flesh, we can please God. And then thirdly, in 1 Thessalonians 4:11, we should be ambitious to lead a quiet life. Study, you know what we mean by study, and the word doesn't mean that at all here in 1 Thessalonians 4:11. It means ambitious. That ye be ambitious to be quiet, to do your own business and to work with your own hands as we commanded you. So we should be ambitious to preach the gospel, Romans 15:20, to please God, 2 Corinthians 5:9, and to lead a quiet life, 1 Thessalonians 4:11. Okay, we need our next term, number 20, philosophia, Philosophia. Philosophia. What do you see in that term? Philosophy. Colossians 2:8. I've told you what philosophy means before. It's a compound word, and it comes from this Greek term, you see. Here's one of those words that I've harped before. We get so much from Latin and Greek. It's helpful to know Latin and Greek. You can better define English words in. Colossians chapter 2 and verse 8. What does the term philosophy mean? Lover of wisdom. And that's what Paul is warning against here in Colossians 2:8, the false type. Beware lest any man spoil you through, and here's our word, philosophia. And then they just gave us a transliteration of it because we've adopted that term into English now and spell it essentially the same way as philosophy. But you have to define philosophy, and in the Greek you don't. You know it's a compound word of love, the phileo term, and sophia of wisdom. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy, the wrong type of loving, the wrong type of wisdom, and vain deceit. And here he defines it, after the traditions of men and the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. Okay, do I hear any cheers? We're on our last compound term here. I didn't get too many amens during this message tonight. I wonder why. Number 21, philosophos. Philosothos. One place, Acts 17:18. Acts chapter 17 and verse 18. But certain philosophers, and you notice that it's similar, much of it is similar to the word that precedes it. One is philosophy, one is philosopher. Okay, that leaves us with one more term. Here's what we did. We looked at 4, phileo. That's our chief father figure. That's the patriarch of all of these terms. Then these were 2 relatively important terms that were derivatives. All under C were compounds. Then we're on D, so we're to another one of these important ones, and I saved it for last. Philema, Philema. Philema, Philema. It's found 2 times in the Septuagint. It's found 7 times in the New Testament. You know what the word means? It means to kiss. We get our word to kiss from the brother-to-brother love terms. Philema, it means to kiss. Once it's used in a bad sense of Judas in Luke 22:48. Here it's really in a compound with another term, kataphileo, in Matthew 26:49 and Mark 14:45, which are just duplicating Luke 22:48, where they actually describe the act. Matthew 26:49, kataphileo, and Mark 14:45, a compound term in these 2 that is just a derivative of philema, because I think they describe more of the act. Let's look at Luke 22:48. This is the one time that it's used in a bad sense. In several passages, notice, but the one time of the kiss of Judas. Luke 22:48. Jesus said unto him, Judas, betrayest thou the Son of Man with a philema, with a kiss? And then just for comparative purposes, we'll look at Matthew 26 and verse 49. Here it's a compound term because it's not just kiss, but it actually goes on to describe the act. That's why it's a little bit different. Forthwith he came to Jesus and said, "Hail, Master," and kissed him. So it's not just the noun kiss, but it's a verb. Okay, other times it's used as a greeting. Once in the Gospels, Luke 7:45. This woman has come and humbled herself before Jesus, breaking the box and shedding her tears and kissing his feet. And then Simon, this religious soul, thinks that he must not be a prophet because he doesn't know what type of woman, what manner of woman this is that's touching him. And we have it in verse 45, "Thou gavest me no philema," no kiss. It's found once in the Gospels. It's found the other 5 times. So that's one reference in Luke 22:48 as the Judas kiss, one reference from Jesus' lips in Luke 7:45, 7 total in the New Testament. That leaves us 5 others. The kataphileo in Matthew and Mark is a compound. It's not exactly like philema. 5 others scattered throughout the rest of the New Testament. In the writings of Paul and Peter, only in their writings, and again it always appears as a greeting. That's how it appears there in Luke 7:45. It appears there with Judas as a greeting as well, but in the evil sense. Okay, Romans chapter 16 and verse 16. "Salute one another with a holy philema." 1 Corinthians 16:20. "All the brethren greet you, greet ye one another with an holy philema." 2 Corinthians, 3 epistles here in a row. 2 Corinthians 13:12. Greet one another with an holy philema. 1 Thessalonians 5 and 26. Greet all the brethren with an holy philema. Those 4 in Paul's writings, once in Peter, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 14. Greet ye one another with a philema of love. Now for Paul it was always a holy one, and for Peter it's a loving one. Now all types of questions arise over this practice. It's generally referred to as the kiss of love in church writings. There's very little instruction-wise given material in the New Testament, except that we're told to do it. But we're not told whether or not the kiss should be on the neck, the hand, the cheek, the lips. We're not told whether it should be done between members of the opposite sex. We're not told whether or not, if we move beyond that society into our society, can a handshake take the place of the kiss of love, or Paul's holy kiss in their day compared to our day in society. And all that becomes rather involved. So what that means is we're not going to be getting into it. But it becomes rather involved in the writings of the church fathers. What type of kiss this was, how valid is it, who may give it to whom, can it be given between members of the opposite sex, how should it be given, on what part of one's body should it be placed. There was much discussion in church history and church writings over the philema. So it became really a technical term for church writers. The philema was the kiss, Paul's holy kiss, Peter's kiss of love. But all the ins and outs of that I think we'll have to save for some other time. But at least we see what the term means, that their term for kiss is part of the love terms. And that's what makes it so heinous when Judas gives a kiss, because it comes from a love term. And the kiss that Judas gave Jesus was certainly not a kiss of love.